Welcome, everybody, to another iteration of Nerding Out with Nic Bodiford. I'm your host, Nic Bodiford. This is going to be the weirdest episode that we have ever had. We are both live streaming and drafting a weird team. So this is a best ball format. It's a 4-person league, all NerdBall folks. The lineup, 1 quarterback, 3 running backs, 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 super flex, 3 normal flex, and 8 bench spots. Scoring is half-point PPR with full-point PPR for the tight end. Pete and Clark, how are you two doing?
Banging.
I'm excited. This is gonna be fun. And I know it's a weird draft, and I know it's a weird format, but I think with drafts coming up this weekend, there's a couple of really good things that are going to help everybody, even if you're not going to play in a 4-man best ball draft. So number one, this gives us an opportunity to talk about knowing your rules before you draft. One of the things that the first thing I asked when Pete said we was going to set up this league is, what is the scoring? What is the roster construction? What are the starters? Those are things you should be asking yourself. And we're going to have time to talk about all of this stuff, but I wanted to start with that.
Yeah. To that point, yeah, I fired up one of my old home leagues the other day and just totally forgot that because it's an 8-person league, we just went with wonky rules. And so it was like 3rd round, and I'm trying to figure out why all these tight ends and quarterbacks are coming off the board. Coincidentally, I decided to go Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts in round 2 and 3 just to be weird, but it worked out because it was a double tight end and 2 QB league. So that was nice to discover partway through. But yeah, to Clark's point, pay attention to your league rules. They're very important, and yardage bonuses and all that kind of jazz can end up winning you the league. So Paddi's joining the league, but he's not joining the call. Pete, is he ready to go? Are we ready to kick this thing off?
He is ready to go. Let me save the draft time. And I think this should be working for, let me confirm on Sleeper. Set draft time. So I have to set my draft date today at 1:05 p.m. I'm pinging Paddi.
Yeah, so we're doing this on Sleeper, and Sleeper is one of the kind of newer platforms. So I know I started playing on, Yahoo and ESPN, and those sites are totally fine. But Sleeper is a really cool site, and their app, I think, actually works a little bit better than their website, which I think, out of my, big league of record home league, I think I'm the only person that ever visits the website on an old-fashioned computer. So check out Sleeper if you haven't.
Yeah. It definitely was built to be the best app, or rather, just to be the most user-friendly app. And it is interesting because it's not like that new. They've been cranking out content or apps, I guess, for probably 6 or 7 years. But I think that ESPN is still the default, and it shouldn't be, because Sleeper's great.
All right, draft is started. Paddi's on the clock. Christian McCaffrey.
Okay. Yeah. So again, it's Superflex league. So CMC coming off the board. It makes sense because he has the largest range of outcomes. Oh my gosh, there goes Travis
of course,
Kelce,
Clark
which I was thinking about doing too.
All right. Oh man, the problem is this is my account that you guys are watching, so I can't put people in ahead of. I can't queue anyone because you'll know who I want to draft. This is terrible. Luckily, I've got a minute.
So again, I'm just going to do this, and y'all tell me if this is annoying. We're going to try to make content for super advanced users, but over at nerdballff.com, we also want to make content for, people who are just casually into fantasy or, just getting into it. And Pete's mentioned something that's important. If you are doing an online draft, whether it's Yahoo, ESPN, all of these sites have an opportunity for you to set up a queue.
Yeah.
And once the picks start flying fast and furious, if during your downtime you spent a little time putting players that you want to get into your queue, that can really save you. That can save you a lot of heartache.
All right, I went QB early. I'm ultimately deciding that Patrick Mahomes is well worth it in this absurd league that we're partaking in.
Yeah. And this is, yeah. Oh man.
And this is obviously not, I don't think this is what I would have done from the 2 spot.
Yeah, you should never
in a 12-team league.
This is where we would like to preface how absurd this is. Okay, because we're also we are tight end. All right, am I going to? Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Well, so tight end premium, right? That's something that we need to keep in mind. It's not going to tilt the scoring terribly, but it might make it so that it's very difficult to stay competitive if you don't have one of the elite guys. Fortunately, depending on whose rankings you look at,
I just drafted the tight end one this year, baby.
Yeah. So I would not. Okay, I was gonna say I would not at all fault Clark if he went tight end here. I think that's a totally viable strategy. I dig that. So Clark went Kelsey and then Kittle, and I don't think he's going to go Mark Andrews.
I like how he is going Mark Andrews.
I love it.
I like how Paddy's getting more or less peer pressured into like drafting a pretty normal team. Like he's like 2 running backs, a high quarterback. Meanwhile, we're just like, Clark is stacking tight ends.
Well, okay. So we didn't have a ton of time to prep for this.
Zero time.
But we're going to have 4 people drafting these 20-man rosters. So I looked at how many people are going to be started each week at each position, and then use that to kind of inform where there is scarcity in a 4-person league. And there's no position that there's scarcity except for tight end still.
Yeah.
We're forced to start a tight end, and it's tight end premium. So these super elite guys are scoring more like wide receivers. So my crafty plan was I'm going to start tight end early because I don't care if I get the QB 15 because I can take 4 of them and then just take the best 2 scores out of that, since this is best ball.
Yeah, no, that's smart. When you have a tight end premium league, it's obviously it puts the emphasis on those tight ends. And if you're playing with a flex, like they become now so valuable that you can use them as a flex play regularly, when most of the time you're not really able to do that when it comes to tight ends. And so it's definitely something where if you it gives you the advantage and the edge in order to like be able to like take down as many, have as many tight ends, top guys on your team as possible. And when you're playing in a 4-team league, you can stack your tight ends quite nicely. All right.
So I decided to go back to the quarterback position and just try to get as much separation at the top as I can. So Josh Allen, Darren Waller, back to Lamar Jackson, and then Derrick Henry.
I thought about Lamar Jackson at the 3-3 instead of Alvin Kamara. But I also wanted to make sure, because we talked about it a lot, and it's a pretty common theme for fantasy this year. But along with the tight ends being a top class, I also think that there's a clear top class of running backs, and I don't really want to have to rely on the running back doldrums to kind of find my guys. So I wanted to make sure I had at least 1 or 2 guys at the RB1 spot who I'm very confident in, and I figured I can, in a best ball, I can find quarterbacks who are going to get me high level of production. But I also, I don't hate I thought about Lamar, going Mahomes, Pitts, and Lamar.
So Kamara was going to be my pick.
Gotcha.
So we're on the same page there.
Yeah. Now I think I'm gonna get Kamara 2.0. I'm gonna go Aaron Jones. I know Clarky Boy is high on Aaron Jones.
I was not going to let Diggs get past me if you guys passed him up. So I feel good about that. Now we're getting into kind of like the tough decision. Like, you're going to be happy with whoever you have, but there is a bit of separation to be gained here. All right.
Yeah,
so
we're in the part of the draft where there's still a lot of people available that may end up at the top of the position, or you can start trying to consider, a guy like Keenan Allen, who I don't think is going to finish as a top 5 wide receiver, but I feel pretty confident he's not going to finish outside of the top 15 either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of to peel back my onion curtain. That's where as I've been doing a lot of mocks and a lot of best ball drafts, I have found more and more that like I can just sit and wait at the wide receiver position. And so that's definitely my line of thinking here, where I don't necessarily feel like there's as much separation from the top guys to the 5 to 10 to 15 guys at wide receiver as there is for running back, tight end. And so I think with that in mind, I'm going to continue to punt, and I'm going to go. We're just going to load up on running backs.
And so I don't hate this. I think that you you might run into some issues at receiver, but you did decide to have 3 running backs and 3 receivers. So the separation that you might be able to gain with bell cows is like, it's totally fair to lean into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus a lot of the guys who I drafted, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, to a certain extent, Ezekiel Elliott has flashed it before. I mean, Alvin Kamara is more than likely going to be used like a wide receiver a fair amount this year, given how bleak the Saints receiving core is. All right, here's where I'm going to pull my first. Oh, yes, I will. Oh, yes, I will. Oh, this is my train of thought. All right, that's my first. There's my first wide receiver.
So this is great because I was hoping for Ridley there, but
Calvin Ridley, who I have is ranked as my wide receiver 3. I think that he has a real solid chance at being the wide receiver 1 this year. And I'm certainly buying this Falcons offense and these Falcons pass catchers, given how efficient we saw Arthur Smith's offense in Tennessee. I think that you can translate that to Atlanta. And so I'm fully willing to invest in this, Atlanta's pass catchers. Clearly.
So we just had, Pete take Calvin Ridley and then DK Metcalf and AJ Brown going off the board. And that is, I think all 3 of those guys are kind of joined at the hip, at least in my mind for fantasy and in the real NFL. I wouldn't argue about any order for those 3 guys, but just this surge of 3 wide receivers going up to challenge the kind of older guard of, DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams is really cool to see, and it's gonna be how it happens in your fantasy drafts. People aren't gonna want to miss out on all of those guys.
I mean, you get a beautiful visualization of what you just said, Clark, because you had Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs as that first group of 3, second group of 3, Ridley, DK, and AJ. Oh, there goes Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, and then I go with the old boring pick. I get DeAndre Hopkins as the wide receiver 8, and I'm very pleased with that.
Yeah.
To Pete's point about the Atlanta offense with Arthur Smith, running play action passing on 35% of plays probably puts you in the top 8, if not top 5 in terms of just play action usage period. Smith's Tennessee Titans last year ran play action on 55% of their dropbacks, which is an unholy number. That's preposterous. And it leads to extreme efficiency in the passing game. So you don't want too high of average depth of targets, because at a certain point you just turn into a downfield one-trick pony. But Ridley and Pitts should both tiptoe that fine line between operating as X receivers on any given play while also stretching the field. It's going to be fun to watch those 2 guys produce 3,000 yards.
It's going to be absurd. I mean, I really hope the amount of hype that we as a fantasy community, that that has been invested into these 2 guys lives up, because you're right, Nick. This offense has a chance to have both of these guys just be putting up ridiculous numbers, which would be glorious to watch. Ooh, Joe Mixon, Nick. Interesting.
So I didn't even want Joe Mixon, but at this point I'll take him as my running back 3. I mean, he, in his range of outcomes, he has a top 5 finish just because of the extreme workload that he can see. Which is, I had a similar thing happen with Deandre Swift last night in a draft where he's not at all a target, and he fell because of his groin injury to the 9th round. And I will go after a 18 touch lead back if healthy in the 9th round in a standard format, no problem.
Yeah, Joe Mixon and DeAndre Swift are both guys. Obviously, if you listen to this week's NerdBall show where we talked about our favorite sleepers, DeAndre Swift is a guy who I'm gotten really high on recently. And it's for the same thing where it's maybe the situation or the back or whatever it is you don't love, with Joe Mixon, but the workload that they are going to be walking into is one that is really hard to pass from a fantasy perspective, just given how much work they're likely to see. And obviously that translates quite nicely to a fantasy production.
So since my Mixon pick, we've had Wait, which direction? Oh yeah, okay. So Terry McLaurin comes up next. I like that. Aaron Rodgers, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans. That group is so fascinating to me. The Lamb, Evans, McLaurin. I think that's another one where like it's at the end of that the wide receiver one grouping, and I think you can just randomize the order of those three guys, and you're just yes, that's correct every time. I don't know how you guys are looking at that, but I would be happy
CeeDee Lamb's
with
ceiling is the thing that I'm like so curious to watch this year.
Yeah, and I think we're getting maybe a little bit too excited about Lamb.
Yeah,
I think he looked really good, and he was a bright spot for Dallas last year. But I feel very awesome that now Amari Cooper is the second fantasy wide receiver on this team because everyone's so excited. Cooper isn't even coming up in the queue for another 10 15 picks,
which for those we talked about at the beginning of this show, where it's like if this is your introduction to fantasy and you're doing your own drafts, not only should you be creating queues and all that, but also make sure that like one of the benefits of creating queues is that you're not then a slave to what the ADP is given you. What sleeper or whatever app you're using thinks you should be drafting then. Because I know, for instance, like we as a site are very high on Corey Davis. Would I feel fine drafting Corey Davis here? Probably. But right now, Sleeper's not recommending that I draft him for like another, 8 rounds. And so it's a way to make sure that you're not missing out on guys who you're really excited about or really high on because they're buried down your draft guide or buried down the ADP list.
Yeah. Similarly related to draft position, I like to know what sites people are using for ADP. So for my old home draft, I used to always ask the commissioner what site he was going to use to print out his ranks, because a lot of times people will look at those ranks and go off of them, even though they know that they shouldn't. So it's good to know kind of who's coming up on someone's list. And in a week,
you got 5 seconds. Okay.
A week or 2 weeks at you, Pete, a week or 2 weeks after the draft, like that you took someone in the 6th round instead of the 8th round will matter nothing.
Right.
Like the person's either going to and no one's going to look back and care where the person was drafted. So if you like someone, don't be afraid to go get them.
Nick tweeted out a quote tweet of someone talking about how Gerald Everett is being used all over the Seahawks offense, and it has given me so much joy. And I am now with my other tight end sleeper, Irv Smith Jr. out for the year. Gerald Everett has become my like absolute. We're drafting him way higher than he has gone in best ball drafts that I have done, but he has become my like go-to tight end too if I go early on a tight end, because you can get him so late.
No, he seems to be the guy at the position that the drafting public is most wrong on. I have him as like the primary guy to break into the positions elite. Now, okay, so pulling back the curtain here, I'm working on a best values per round piece. That doesn't necessarily mean the best pick in the round, but the best value. And so for the 4th round of like half point PPR drafts, I am focusing on Kyle Pitts. And I did that just breaking down the tight end position as a whole. So last year, Kittle missed a couple games. So when we're just looking at his like raw,
got me right back.
When we're just looking at it as raw like totals, Kittle's not going to show up, but just to communicate the point. I'm on the clock now. Robert Woods. I was looking at Woods. To communicate the point. Let me just rub this in your faces.
Have I drafted? Oh yeah. Damn it. Not that I wanted Brandon Ayuk, just that I should have known that you were gonna take him at some point.
Yeah, you should have sniped me. But Travis Kelce finishes the wide receiver and running back 4 last year. Jaron Waller finishes the wide receiver and running back 8 last year. The number 3 tight end was Robert Tonyan, who scored 11 touchdowns last year. 11 touchdowns, which was equivalent to the wide receiver 37 and the running back 24. There's a massive drop off And I just, regardless of format, I know this is like tight end premium, so we went heavy on tight end early, but like regardless of format, you need to get yourself an elite tight end. And it's not because it's a onesie position and onesie positions are like you have to address. No, it's not that. It's that they score like a top 5 player. Like Travis Kelce is an elite running back. And when you can add that to your lineup and not lose a lot at the other positions, you need to do that.
Yeah. And that's always been my thing with Kyle Pitts, is that if Kyle Pitts, who tests, he's built and tests like a wide receiver and like a huge, big bodied wide receiver. If Kyle Pitts were a wide receiver, came into the NFL as a wide receiver, I don't feel like people would be that crazy. Like they wouldn't think it's crazy for him to get 1,000 yards, for him to finish a wide receiver to a top 24 option at wide receiver, if he was that, because he's, you know, the unquestioned number 2 target filling in for Julio Jones. There's this huge workload, blah, 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 blah. And the fact that he has this tight end designation, I feel like makes people feel like, well, rookie tight ends have never had success, whatever your just, you know, justification is. If you look at it that way, I think exactly what you're saying, Nick, where it's like, if you were a wide receiver and he finishes a wide receiver 2, that would instantly make him a top 3 option at tight end. Which is how I am drafting him and how I did draft him. All right. What do I need to bolster here?
So I don't think that that we can project him for a Justin Jefferson finish, but I do find that there are a lot of similarities in the passing trees. Now, Atlanta is going to use way more play action than Minnesota will. Minnesota doesn't use play action because they're idiots. But there are so few receiving options. It's just like Minnesota last year, Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook. Atlanta this year, Calvin Ridley and Mike Davis. The receivers are not very good outside of that on either team. Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith, you know what? I know there are some who like them. I don't. It seems to me that like 125 targets are totally within Pitts's range of outcomes this season, and that's what Jefferson saw last year. I don't expect him to be quite as efficient, but it's too similar of a situation for me to be worried about taking Kyle Pitts in the 4th round.
Speaking of the Falcons, Clark, the Mike Davis pick, I wanted to bring this up on this week's NerdBall show as a potential sleeper. I love that pick. Do you like it? It seems to me that people maybe also are not undervaluing, but just maybe under anticipating what Mike Davis's ceiling could be in Atlanta as seemingly unquestioned RB1 who just showed that he can handle a solid fantasy workload.
Yeah, Nick was on this super early and has kind of convinced me to come around on it. So my hesitation with Mike Davis is that I watched him play a lot in Carolina last year, and it just wasn't very impressive. It kind of a juxtaposition to that is, you know, when you watch Deandre Swift play, God, he looks so good and fast and strong out there. But you just don't get that kind of play from Mike Davis. And so that had me kind of down on him. But then Nick, I feel like has, you know, don't let me put words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, properly identified that, well, even though he didn't look that great, he sure scored a lot of fantasy points, and he's going to a situation that's even better in that he's going to start the year as the number 1, and they've had many opportunities to bring in other players and try to bolster that spot on their roster and haven't. And so now someone who had the most successful running back in the league, I think a huge part due to the running back being amazing, which is Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry's old boss is coming over to Atlanta. I mean, Mike Davis is not Derrick Henry, but we know that the offensive coordinator and now head coach understands that I believe that running the ball is important and understands all the things that it can do for play action and to help the offense move down the field, but who also isn't a giant donkey. So yeah, Mike Davis is still the last good running back you can get, and he goes like way after he should.
Yeah, no, he's a guy who as I talked about those running back doldrums, those 2 guys that kind of really I like to target there are Mike Davis and Damian Harris, both of whom I think have that RB1 ceiling to them, but are currently not being valued as that. Damian Harris might be his ADP might be rising a bit too much for my liking. He might be priced out of where kind of I'm looking to take him, given the news of Cam Newton being cut and what that ultimately means for Damian Harris's touchdown ceiling, which is now huge and enormous. But those 2 guys are definitely middle round running backs who I love targeting.
Yeah, so I think you guys kind of nailed it all there. The way that I like to talk about Mike Davis is that he's proficient in all aspects of the game, whether that's pass protection, route running, and just carrying the ball. He's pretty big. He's fleet of foot, but he's like a big bodied back. And his primary backfield competition is Quadri Allison and Cordero Patterson. Like Clark said, they could have brought in other running backs. They chose not to. If you're going to be the unquestioned lead back in an Arthur Smith scheme, so like last night, I picked from the 9-hole in a 10-team league, Kelsey, Diggs, AJB, Josh Allen, and I took Mike Davis as my running back 1 in the 5th. I feel very good about that start. He will not be like you said, Clark. He's not going to finish as Derrick Henry did last year, but like it's very difficult for running backs not to produce valuable usage, like running back 2 usage or production at worst, when they're seeing 20 touches and like 7 of those are targets. Like, yeah. I think that Mike Davis will again have a fruitful fantasy football season this year.
Yep. I think that seems like a given. LaVisca slowing things down as we get into the late teen rounds.
Yeah, so we now just go for it, Clark.
We had Julio Jones go right after Odell Beckham. I took Odell because I'm kind of reaching at wide receiver because of what I started with, and then Pete took Julio. Nick, who are you?
Other way, I took Julio before you. Actually, you took Odell after me.
I would have taken Odell.
Yeah. I like both of those guys. And I would be curious to see who Nick prefers. I think I've grown higher on Odell, but Julio still feels to me like he looked good when he was healthy, and if he's healthy in Tennessee, he has a lot of potential there.
I think that Julio. I think that they're both fine. I think they're both good picks. Julio will see higher volume.
Really splitting that line there, Nick.
I mean, so when you're drafting at this point, when you have to diagnose, it's just what the range of outcomes is and then what you're looking for. Julio already has a lower body injury that he's been nursing. It is probably a hamstring injury. We can't know that, but he had a ton of hamstring issues last season and the years preceding. And the problem with that I have learned is that scar tissue builds up and you have to basically go in and destroy the scar tissue or it's going to continue to be a problem. If this lower body injury that he's been battling in the preseason is a hamstring injury, then he probably didn't get the scar tissue handled. Something that Dr. Morse touched on was that the Titans have they have like the worst hamstring protocol in the NFL. Awesome. That's hugely problematic for Julio. Now, last season, Julio had the 5th highest yards per route run in the NFL with a minimum of like 50 targets, which is 1 spot behind AJ Brown. So when he's on the field, he's going to do it. And this is a nice condensed passing tree. They let 4 of their primary passing game targets go last season: Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, Jonnu Smith, and Michael Pruitt. Like, they're going to just have to use him no matter what. When he's out there, he's going to see 10 targets a game. Odell, his ceiling perhaps is as high. I think he's probably got a safer floor, but he's going to see less volume. So, pick your poison.
No, I think that's a good call. Clark, absolutely love Tua Tagovailoa this year in fantasy as a late round quarterback who I think a lot of people, including the Dolphins themselves, they seems are sleeping on or just undervaluing for whatever reason. Yeah,
this is why after about 6 quarterbacks go off the board, I throw my hands up and say it doesn't matter, because Tua Tagovailoa is by ADP not going to be drafted in a lot of leagues. So I really like him late. And so what I've done with my last 3 picks here, I passed on quarterback super early. And after everybody got their first couple of quarterbacks, it really slowed down there. So late in the draft, kind of strategy wise, I got to start with hyper premium tight ends and then close the draft with like the quarterbacks, 14, 15, 16 of Matthew Stafford, Tua Tagovailoa, and Sam Darnold. So keeping that roster construction in mind.
Shout out to Nick's last 2 picks, which are probably going to win him the league.
Can someone take Cortland Sutton though? Because
don't tell me what to do. He was off my cue and I was too busy rambling.
I waited too long on quarterbacks or on my backup quarterback or my third string quarterback, I guess. There we go.
So that's
Sutton is a little Mike Davis-y for wide receivers. So it's not the most incredibly enticing situation in Denver, but Sutton is going to be, that traditional X wide receiver, and he is a giant and he is very good coming off of a torn ACL. So there is some concern there, but for how late Sutton is listed in most people's ADPs, he's really a great late round shot to take because he could have, top 10, top 15 upside.
Totally.
So let's run through this real quick here and just kind of tell everybody why my team's the best, and then also go into, I think we decided that buy-in was around $400. It gets you entrance to the league and a spot on my show.
Yep.
And you guys can give that to me in whatever medium. But Paddi's team started off. So he did the CMC thing early, and then for those that wondering, the money thing was a joke. It just didn't land. Kyler Murray is
we're all loaded. We're all rolling in cash, and
that's right.
That's why we just haphazardly throw $400 around on this draft.
So he's got Kyler Murray, and his running back group is like, this was a format where I was kind of thinking about taking Dalvin Cook early because there's going to be so many running backs that you could draft if you're wrong. And I know that's like not great process. You should go for the optimal, believe that you're right kind of a thing. But he's got Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook, who will compete on a weekly basis to be the running back ones. Followed it up with Jonathan Taylor, which I think is a totally fine RB3. Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Allen Robinson. He's not wanting for anything at those positions. TJ Hawkinson right now slotted in as his tight end one. That could be an area where we kind of kick him in the pants.
Or it could also come with a tight end premium where the Lions have no one else to throw the football to. I
know.
It could be something. Hawkinson in a tight end premium league is Sky, who I'm definitely targeting because of the fact that he could just see an absurd amount of workload. I don't think it's going to be at all efficient. I don't think that he compares to the top 3 or 4 guys, however many you want to continue and add into that top. But getting your number 1 tight end in a tight end premium league in the 7th round, and as a guy who could see 110 catches this year is not a bad move in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. His range of, I don't like him because the team that he's on, but what you're saying with usage could totally just blow that up in my face. CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, love that. I would have a very difficult time rostering Dallas Goedert with Zach Ertz talking about how he's going to retire an Eagle and all that. But Dak in the Superflex is fantastic. And I thought that James Robinson, wherever he ended up taking him very late, was
13th round.
13th round. I thought that was a terrific pick. Deontay Johnson, Cooper Kupp, Josh Jacobs. I'm not terribly interested in those guys. I think they're fine depth.
I love Deontay Johnson this year. I think that he showed the fact that he is, I think he is the Steelers' number 1 wide receiver in terms of Ben Roethlisberger's target tree. And I think that if he gets his drops under control, which isn't if, but all these, everyone, when you're taking later in drafts, have ifs to them. But if he gets his drops, if he doesn't drop the ball, he's, I think, a pretty locked and loaded high end wide receiver 2 at the very least. So he's a guy who I like a lot this year in fantasy, actually.
So I think Deontay Johnson probably deserves, he probably deserves to be their X receiver. I don't know. Chase Claypool looks incredible.
Chase Claypool, I mean, again, yeah, it's what the role they're going to be for Chase Claypool, whether or not Chase becomes the X or if they keep him as that kind of gadget and not in terms of that's just his role, but just he used in sweeps, used in kind of all over the field, like a Laviska Shenault, and then have Johnson stay as their X.
It's an interesting question you're going to have to answer. So which one ended up on what team?
I got Chase.
I don't know why we need to break this down. My team's obviously the best and most strategically executed draft of anyone's, but Deontay Johnson, super, super good. The Steelers started 11-0 last year. I think they weren't playing, the top competition. That doesn't matter, right? And so Roethlisberger's going super, super late. And, analysts and people like Claypool and Deontay Johnson, but their value is so depressed, I think, because they are both so young and because everyone think Ben Roethlisberger retired 2 years ago. I think both of those guys are fantastic values this year just because of that passing offense, 4,600 yards if Ben wants it to do that. And both of those guys are super, super talented. They are young. They are a little raw, but it's two of the latest iterations of like, how do the Steelers know who these guys are seemingly every year? It's amazing.
So this is an interesting contrast. My reasons for being lower, I think, than market on Deontay Johnson don't have anything to do with youth or ability. I think he's fantastic. And he's shown that he is like a route running technician very early, which sets him up to have like a 15-year career. I don't care at all about drops. Players who are just beasts at being a receiver can drop the ball from time to time. That doesn't bother me. My issues are purely organizational with the Steelers. Sure. You don't like the fact that the owner intervenes and says, draft a running back in round 1. That's really bad. So Roethlisberger could throw for a lot of yards and his arm could fall off. I think getting pieces of the passing game is fine. I wouldn't want to invest heavily in their passing game. But to everyone's point, Deandre Johnson is fantastic. Just putting a bow on the rest of the roster there. I like what he did with Tom Brady, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown. That double stack is excellent. Gesicki is fighting for his job against Jalen Waddle because they're both slot receivers. We'll see how that pans out. Javonte Williams at the final pick is totally great. I hogged the mic with this team. And Pete chimed in a little bit, but do either one of you guys have more thoughts on Paddi's squad as a whole?
No, I love it. I already shared my thoughts.
Okay. Clark, do you want to break down your process for us?
Sure. And this is just going tight end heavy with draft capital and then taking what the board, sent me. So it's 4-team league, but that doesn't really matter. I invested my early draft capital in tight end. I just believe that that's the right move this year. I think there's 3 tight ends worth a premium price: Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, and George Kittle. I really like Mark Andrews. Hawkinson is absolutely the number 5 tight end. It's going to harken back to those kind of boring Jason Witten years that we used to have. Like, he wouldn't knock your socks off, but he wasn't a disadvantage for your team each week either. So I invested in tight end early. I was the first one to take a wide receiver because Devontae Adams fell to pick 13. So if you're in a 12-team league and you're at the turn, it is popular again to go running back super early and often. A lot of the FFPC drafts I've done this year and just mocks show it's back to running backs in the first round. So that happens in your home league. That gives you a tremendous opportunity to take either Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, someone like that at the turn, and then you ended up getting the best wide receiver because everyone was worried about running back scarcity.
I aggressively endorse that message.
Yeah, because there are good running backs late. We talked about Mike Davis already. Some of the guys we're going to get to later, like those guys are going in the 4th, 5th round, so you're going to have an opportunity to get someone, even if they're not as sexy as like. Then I went Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, and Antonio Gibson. I just like all 3 of those running backs. I think they're all going. Nick Chubb's going super early, but then Harris and Gibson are going late enough to where everybody's going to have an opportunity to pick them twice. And I think that they're poised to really take off.
I think that's great. And to the Devontae Adams point, I love that you stacked him with Aaron Rodgers. That's fantastic. Yeah. And your running backs 4 and 5, CEH and Chris Carson, like
absolutely love.
Yeah, you've got a shit ton of potential here.
Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Chris Carson in a 12-team draft. If that's my RB2 and RB3, like I'm ecstatic. Even if and you were talking about that late round, like you could also honestly, if you're at the back end and you go Devontae Adams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then you come back around and you're able to get Chris Carson, he might be gone by then. But Mike Davis, also like that's a really solid start pick, first 3 picks in my opinion.
Yeah, I love it. DeAndre Hopkins, you got at excellent value. Clark, and Amari Cooper could still be the Dallas wide receiver one. Even if he's not, I would be so shocked if there is wider than like a 15 to 20 target gulf between he and CeeDee Lamb. So I think that's awesome. Circling back to your point about Mark Andrews, I think that his talent receiving wise is in the same league as the elite guys. I think Travis Kelce is better, but I don't think that there's like a massive discrepancy in overall ability. He has issues with diabetes, so he doesn't play a full complement of snaps. They're going to keep him at like 55%. And that's okay because they target the hell out of him when he's on the field, and they don't really have anybody else to throw to. I think Rashad Bateman went on PUP, so he's out for however many weeks, and Marquise Brown still, I think he returned to walkthroughs or something, but he's not cleared to like actually practice hard because of the hamstring. So Baltimore's just back in their old situation where they have to huck it to Mark Andrews the moment he steps on the field. So I really like that. Break down Sam Darnold.
So in this particular format, I was running out of spots for guys that I really want to roster. So I was the last person to take a QB. I think I took a QB after everyone else had taken 2. And so I got Aaron Rodgers as essentially QB 12, what that would have looked like, or QB like 9, 10, 11 in your home league. So I really like him. And then at the Matthew Stafford was my good veteran, like backup to that. In a home league, I wouldn't draft 2 quarterbacks. If it was just starting one QB, I'll just get one of the premium guys, cheap premium guys like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, and then I'll worry about a substitute in week 9. But then I went Matthew Stafford because I really like him. Tua, we talked about him. I think he is going to break out. And I think we're in for a breakout season with Sam Darnold. So instead of picking Trevor Lawrence or Kirk Cousins or someone like that, I decided I'm just going to go with my gut. I feel like Sam Darnold's going to be good, and I feel like the Panthers are going to be good. So pull the trigger on it.
Plus Loki stack with DJ Moore, which I'm not against.
Okay, Pete, why your team sucks and is awful. Dude, man, you got like Kamara Elliott and Aaron Jones is like having 3 picks in the first 8.
It's a joke. I love it.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great start.
Yeah, so I started Patrick Mahomes, Kyle Pitts. I had to get Kyle Pitts, so I did everything I could to get him. And then Patrick Mahomes, opportunity to get the QB one, why not? But then, so that was the 4 running backs. The way that I've always approached the running back position is I want guys, and I understand this is best ball, but this is my like redraft strategy. I want guys who I want my first 2 running backs to be guys who I plug, I play, I never have to worry about for the rest of the season. And so I'm willing to spend those first 2 early picks on running backs to ensure that. And then I trust myself at the receiver position to be able to figure that out. And so having the opportunity to get 4 of guys who I think you can plug and play with no problem this year, I absolutely love. Austin Eckler is my running back 5 this year in a half point. Aaron Jones, I'm becoming much more excited about, obviously with no Jamal Williams there. I think his ceiling is he could battle again for the RB1. All these 4 guys I think could be in contention for the RB1 title this year. And then at wide receiver, I did the same thing, like Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin. Yeah, I would have to spin a pretty saucy narrative in order to talk about him realistically being the wide receiver 1 this year. But both Calvin Ridley and Keenan Allen, I think, have a real shot at finishing the top guy at wide receiver for 2021. And then going on down after that was all just a combination of my guys and guys who I think maybe could have really strong back end of the years. And that's like Jamar Chase, who maybe he starts slow, but really, really comes on at the end. And then Trey Sermon, whenever Trey Sermon takes over the 49ers backfield, like he's going to be, he seems like a top, 24 running back easy in terms of production.
I think you got Chase at a great place. I really like that you did the double stack with the Chargers guys, Justin Herbert, Eckler, and Keenan Allen. There is a a lot of data that supports double stacking, especially in best ball. I like to apply it to managed leagues, as Clark knows. I find it hysterical that you were the one who ended up with Trey Sermon after Clark and I spent the entire preseason,
the entire time talking about it,
cooling ourselves off, thinking about what Trey Sermon can do in this offense. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And Miles Sanders was like an excellent value. I don't think that he is ever going to be the player that I thought he was going to be, especially in his rookie season. But again, it's 4-person team, so like whatever. But 17th round for a guy who probably gets like 250 carries, I like that.
He is a guy who I think the fantasy community is. It's not that they're like low on him. I just think that he feels like kind of an afterthought, like a forgotten commodity. And when Jalen Hurts was under center last year, I mean, Miles Sanders put up really, really good fantasy numbers with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, it's like a 4 or 5 game sample, but Jalen Hurts being the Eagles starting quarterback doesn't diminish Miles Sanders' fantasy potential, in my opinion. And so he's the guy who I am willing to take a flyer on in the 4th, 5th round, if in a redraft, in a 12-team redraft, if that's where he's kind of like going. I wouldn't mind taking a flyer as my like RB3. And if I really loaded up on RB early, he's my RB4.
Okay.
So Jacobs went just before Miles Sanders. I feel like Josh Jacobs has been kind of left for dead. And I get why. I feel like Josh Jacobs, the player, is very, very good. And I know that we are going to see relentless rushing, even if it results in 2-yard losses for an entire game out of the Raiders. But have we overestimated Kenyon Drake's impact on Josh Jacobs?
For me, it's not Kenyon Drake's impact. For me, it's the fact that like Josh Jacobs in losing games doesn't score touchdowns and he doesn't produce in games that the Raiders lose, and the Raiders
he has 2 TDs.
Right. The Raiders have one of the toughest schedules this year in the NFL. And I just think that they're going to be in a lot of games that they're going to be close or losing. And that's not a game script that Josh Jacobs thrives in. I think for Paddi wise, in a team like this, he's what Josh Jacobs is his running back 5. The value works out, but
yeah, I just mean the order. Of like you're on the board. You're not going to have both of them.
Right.
They both have their warts. Miles Sanders is so interesting because he is so electric and he did so well with Hurts. And it feels like at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the offseason, Miles Sanders, people were a lot higher on that than where they ended up now. And so I also think this has been interesting. I want to get it out before I forget. I have my league of record drafting later today. And I'm looking at how this draft went and looking at the old guy discounts that we got and wondering how much of this has to do with all 3 of us are just absolutely obsessed with fantasy football. And I think one of the clever things that I try to do is be first on a player and, outsmart everybody by taking, my guy, even though I don't know. So I bet in your standard league, this is going to be slanted a lot more towards these old guys. But if not, like where Deandre Hopkins is going, where Mike Evans is going, where Amari Cooper is going. Like, I feel like by week 4, you're going to be very glad that Mike Evans is your wide receiver 2 that you got in the 4th round.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
Evans does not get the love that he deserves. I mean, that dude, he's the record holder for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start his NFL career. He's done it like 7 times. It's absurd. I think that Josh Jacobs has finally arrived at an acceptable place to draft him. I mean, he was like a 2nd round pick last year, and now he's more like a 4th or 5th. He will get a lot of rushes. To your question, Clark, that may have been rhetorical, but have we overestimated Kenyon Drake? I think like affirmatively or assertively no, because Jalen Richard was enough to ding Josh Jacobs in the receiving game. And if Jalen Richard can do that, then I think Kenyon Drake can do that too. It's just a usage thing. It's not like Kenyon Drake is fantastic. I don't think that he is. I think that he's a subpar running back. It's just we're battling Gruden, I think, more than we are Drake. But again, I think that Josh Jacobs has finally arrived at the place where like I now would consider drafting him.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to just go at my team? I'm not going to intro it. Do you guys just want to tear it apart?
It's impossible when you end with Corey Davis and Will Fuller,
Yeah.
both of whom are like my go-to best ball targets. The only guy who I have we talked a little bit about Joe Mixon when you picked him. The only guy who I have real beef with is Logan Thomas, who I don't think Logan Thomas is going to produce at the level that you took him as the tight end 6, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, tight end 7. Like much rather would have Gerald Everett, much rather would have Jonnu Smith. Logan Thomas for me, I wrote about this and I'm trying to remember all of my numbers, but basically I feel like he's very touchdown dependent and that is going to drastically change with the current structure of Washington's football team, that he's not going to see the same high target share. That's what it is. He wasn't very efficient with the targets that he got. And the reason why he finished a high fantasy receiver is because Alex Smith just like peppered him with looks. And I don't think that's going to ring true with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I can also see him being, maybe a less receptions, less yard, but like a Robert Tonyan, where it's like he finishes with 400 yards receiving, but 10 touchdowns, and that's viable.
So what I liked with Everett was that they just paid him Everett. Of course, I like Gerald Everett. What I liked about Logan Thomas is that they just paid him a bunch of money. They gave him a 3-year deal of like $27 million over 3 years. He no longer has to work with the like pop gun arm of Alex Smith. He's got the Amish rifle to rifle it in there to him. Curtis Samuel has been hurt for like months now, and Rivera keeps saying, oh, he's going to be ready, but he's not practicing. Diami Brown, I think, has been, I think that he's an excellent prospect. I think that everybody should draft him. I think that limited, like one trick pony downfield receiver guys are just that, though. Thomas could end up being the number 2 target on this team again. I don't think it's going to be JD McKissick. I think McKissick I think he can hurt Antonio Gibson's ceiling. Gibson can also be, I want to make Clark bristle here. He can be DC CMC. That's totally in his range of outcomes. Anyway, he's my second tight end behind Waller, and I decided not to take any more tight ends and just sort of embrace the like I am right about this, that I should have drafted Darren Waller. So I feel fine about Logan Thomas as an insurance
just like
policy.
the one bye week filler.
Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
What I like about this pick is it just shows, even in a 4-team league, how quickly the cliff is from the elite tight ends. How quickly the cliff approaches from the elite tight ends to guys who may end up being very good. You nailed it. Like, the touchdowns are going to have to come from somewhere. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is really rounding into a higher quality quarterback, and he's going to be playing, if not for his best team in Washington, then close, because of Miami last year. Mm-hmm. And Logan Thomas, super talented. You nailed it. Just paid him a lot of money. He could, you catch 8 or 9 touchdowns, all of a sudden you're the tight end 3 or 4. But I feel a whole lot better trotting out even like TJ Hawkinson just week to week than Logan Thomas. And to be fair, Hawkinson in this exercise went like 25 picks before Logan Thomas. So it's not like you picked Logan Thomas over Hawkinson. It just, you got to squint real hard after those first few guys.
Also Trey Lance as your fifth to last pick in the 16th round. Yeah,
by
QB4 Trey Lance. That, I mean, god damn it. This is build your queue, people. Build your queue, because Trey Lance, I would have had him early. But yes, Trey Lance is also a guy who I've been absolutely going to in best ball leagues, because when he takes over the 49ers, he will be a top 6 quarterback in fantasy.
I think it's going to look like, remember when not a fan of him now, but when Deshaun Watson started like halfway through the rookie year,
and then
was putting like 30 points a game. I think it's going to be like that.
Was like tossing for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns a game, and you're just like, where did this guy come from? It's like, yes, that's exactly what Trey Lance is going to do.
Yeah, and I think that I really do not like the idea of drafting a quarterback in a regular old 12-team league, a backup quarterback, unless your backup quarterback or your QB2 is going to be one of these guys who you can at least tell yourself the story that in X number of weeks, I'm going to get this gigantic advantage. So, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. These guys have an opportunity to really come in and crush it as rookies. I mean, we saw Jalen Hurts do that, and I feel like Trey Lance and Justin Fields, I feel like they can do more than what we saw from Hurts. So if you are going to take a backup on purpose. Yeah. Don't draft even though I love him, don't draft Sam Darnold as your backup. You can pick him up off of waivers later, probably.
Yeah, totally.
So on this subject of QBs, I was really thrilled to get the group that I did. So starting with Josh Allen, first overall pick, and then was able to pair him with Stephon Diggs. Quietly got Lamar Jackson as my probable super flex.
Your QB2, your RB1.
Yeah. But then I just kind of lucked into this, ended up getting DK Metcalf, and then was like, wait a second, I should stack him with Russell Wilson. And then had a moment where I didn't know who else to pick and realized, oh, Tyler Lockett's there. So I have completely captured the highly lucrative Seattle passing game from a sporadic week to week. That group is going to score a shit ton of points for me, and I'm really excited about it.
So much. Tyler Lockett, for whatever your comfort level is with him in a redraft due to his just volatility, excellent best ball pick. An excellent best ball, because if he has a bad game, who cares? They're not going to count it. But if he has a great game where he catches, 8 catches for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns, great. You have that in your bank to easily win you your week.
Yeah. All right. Any closing thoughts, guys?
No. I hope that this has offered any kind of insight that you can ultimately take into a 12-team normal redraft, as opposed to all of the 4-team Superflex tight end premium best ball leagues that you play in.
Yeah. I mean, on a serious note, I think we did actually manage to cram some stuff in here where how do you look at Superflex? How do you look at tight end premium? Is stacking good? So hopefully there are some fun takeaways and everybody got a laugh out of it. Regardless, thank you all for tuning in.